Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Super excited to chop it up with this guest today. Normally we bring in coaches from literally around the world to uplift and honor their journey in this great profession. Well, today we're going to kind of flip it up. This is actually our very first student athlete. We're going to be talking all about NIL. I'm going to say it wrong 1,000 times. I'm going to say NLI and NIL and all that kind of stuff. But this guest today has been kind of on the forefront of NIL for track and field. Help me welcome the wise, the wonderful Mr. 400 Hurdles himself, Trevor Bassitt from Ashland University. Trevor, thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, you've done it all. Well, you haven't done it all. You are doing it all currently as a student athlete there at Ashland University. 48-point 400 hurdle, which is just amazing. Your guest number 153, I have to know, have you ever run a half mile? Because I think you could run 153 in the half mile.
I've ran 1-800. It was about 2 or 3 years ago indoors on a 200 flat track. Definitely did not run 153. I ran a 2 flat, and I think if I trained for it long enough, I could run a 153, but I do not want to train for it. I would not be that good at it. So I don't think I will ever run a 153.
So they've never thrown you in like the 800 leg of a DMR or a 4x8 at a relay carnival?
No, I've done the 400 leg of a DMR, but
Yeah.
not the 800 leg now.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. If you're that good at the 400 and 400 hurdles, man, just stick there. You're good. You're doing a good job. Obviously, the coaches are steering you in the right direction, so
Yeah.
you're doing a great job there. So, if you don't know Trevor as a student athlete, real quick, I mean, just let's check off the authenticity mark here. My man is the indoor 400 silver medalist for the World Indoor Championships, not NCAA, World Indoor Championships here just recently this past winter in the 400 Open. And then, like I said, 48-point on the 400 hurdles, multi-time All-American and national champion, and because I think Bershawn listens to this. Bershawn Jackson, new head coach at St. Augustine's, by the way, who owns the D2 national record for the 400 hurdles. Trevor said he has it on his target board. He's going for it, so I can't wait to see it. And obviously, if anybody can do it, Trevor, golly, man, you're right there. So go Google his name. That sounds so grandiose, but it's true. If you want to know more about Trevor and his athleticism, man, he's got it all. Go check it out. On top of that, he's at Ashland University, a great university there in Ohio, and we're all about honoring coaches and uplifting their journeys, and we've had two of his now former coaches in one way, shape, or form here on the podcast. Early on at the Gill Connections podcast, we were blessed to have Trevor's hurdle sprint coach, Ernie Clark, on the show, now at San Jose State University. It's funny. I need to go back and listen to that episode, Trevor, because we talked about you, because that would have been 2 years ago. So you'd have been a sophomore. What were you running besides 2 flat on the indoor 800? What was your PR back then in the 400 hurdles, you think, in the sophomore year?
I was 50.8.
Yeah. So here we were probably talking to you about this. Hey, here's this kid, 50.8, and that's nothing to sneeze at, right? It was like,
Yeah.
hey, I remember him saying, like, hey, this kid's special. Like, he's going to blow that out the water. Boy, was he right. Good job, Ernie. And then a few episodes later, we had the now late, great Judd Logan, the head coach of Ashland University, who has recently passed away. Love the Logan family. You probably don't know, Trevor. One of my very first hires here at Gill Athletics was Nate Logan, Judd's son. So,
Okay.
yeah, so I love the Logan family, man. So go back and listen to those podcasts. Be kind of a history lesson with Trevor. It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so today we are going to talk about NIL. If you don't know what that means, it's just kind of acronyms that stands for name, image, and likeness. And our guy Trevor here is kind of on the forefront, doing a lot of things. It's affected his life, his collegiate life as well. We're going to learn about that. And so I just thought, we'd have Trevor on. He was on a podcast recently, Christy Dosh's Game Face podcast. She has a couple of podcasts. And I was listening to it and just made me think, like, there's coaches out there that don't know what or why NIL is. Some think it's not a great idea. I thought we would just bring in someone who's kind of making the gameplay right now. He's actually writing the script on what NIL looks like for track athletes to kind of explain it. So, Trevor, I'm going to shut up now. Tell us, let's start with, give us your kind of definition of NIL and quick, CYA, I guess here, Trevor is not a lawyer nor a NCAA administrator, et cetera. Neither am I. So this is there's no advice here. Don't go out and get yourself in trouble. Don't go and get yourself ineligible. Don't break any recruiting rules or whatever. I don't know how all that fits into it. We're just going to get one person's opinion and experiences at NIL today. So Trevor, start with telling us kind of layman's term, what is NIL?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm going to be telling you about my experience with NIL and kind of like the athlete's approach to it and how it looks like for us. So NIL, like you said, it's name, image, likeness. To really boil it down, it's essentially what NIL is. It's the college athlete's ability to use their status, their stature as a college athlete to profit, to make money, essentially. So for the longest time, we've seen it with like college basketball and college football, right? These athletes where they could sign a deal with like a local restaurant, right? They weren't allowed to, but now they could, and then you can make money off of it. Like the best track example is I know Matt Bowling has a sponsorship, the Sprinter of Georgia. I think he has an NIL deal with Dunkin' Donuts, right? So name, image, likeness is essentially being able to use your status as a collegiate athlete, as a high level athlete, to get sponsorships, to represent companies, to help kind of put some money in your pocket. So is essentially what it boils down to.
So before NIL, you as a student athlete, now the rules are different for regular students. You couldn't, this is a question mark, you couldn't go out and even get a job like that. Like you could go get a job and be like a waiter or whatnot at a restaurant or whatnot, but you couldn't get like hey, XYZ restaurant is my favorite restaurant. We go there every Sunday after track meets or whatever. You weren't allowed to use that. Like you said, I think you said stature of being an athlete.
Yeah, no.
High publicity at all, right?
Yeah, no, you could not do that.
And if I remember correctly, there were even some restrictions on just your overall earning. That waiter example, like there was some cap on that, I think, because I remember there being a pretty famous case. Northwestern football player was going to be in a commercial or a play or something like that, and he had, like, even before he had become a football player, was in acting, and they said he couldn't because you're a football player first, not a human, a student first. And then I think there's been some examples in track where maybe there was an athlete at, maybe it was Texas A&M, who had a really high-profile YouTube channel, again, before they went to Texas A&M, and NCAA said, no, you can't do it because you're an athlete first, not a student first.
Yeah, the best example I can think of is there was a football player. There was a kicker at UCF. I think it's that his name's like at D Stroyan or something like that. And he was a kicker for UCF, and he had this super popular YouTube channel. And the NCAA flat came out and told him, like, you either need to stop using this, like stop making YouTube videos, or you're not allowed to play college football. And he was making really good money off it. So he's like, all right, I guess I'm just done playing college football. He's like, he's like, I like football, but I'm not going to pass up on that. And those are examples where like NIL has been needed for a long time, because you have people who are doing something that they love, giving fans great access, like through a YouTube channel, through day in the life things. But if you made a single penny off it, NCAA is knocking on your door. So this is something where it's long overdue, that I've always felt like it's long overdue. And it's kind of giving these athletes more freedom to grow themselves, grow their personal brand when they're at the peak of their popularity, pretty much.
And why do you think, and this is just you're a senior now, so what are you 21 years old at this point?
I'm a fifth year senior, so I'm getting my master's right now. Yeah.
So you're like 30 years old? How old?
24.
24. Okay, so you're 24. So you were looking at an athlete, graduate student, 24-year-old perspective here. But why do you think the NCAA had this restriction of like, hey, because you're an athlete, you cannot make money off of your name or your image or your likeness? What do you think their reasoning was?
So the NCAA was founded, I've done a ton of research on this, right?
Okay,
my senior project in high school was why college athletes should be paid. And then freshman year of college, they wouldn't let me do that again. So I did why Division II athletes should be paid. So I've done a lot of research on this. So the NCAA was founded, and it was founded around this statement of amateurism, okay, which at the time was true. But as college sports have gotten bigger, the NCAA has become a billion-dollar revenue company. They're a nonprofit, which means they just spend it all, right? Nonprofits make money, they just have to spend all the money. So they had this what became a false sense of amateurism, in my opinion, because I have a hard time believing that you're calling college athletes, at least for football and basketball, Division I, you're calling them amateur athletes, but the NCAA makes over $1 billion off of March Madness, makes over $1 billion from the college football playoff. So it quickly turned into just being the NCAA saying it's amateurism just because that's how it's always been. So they were very much against it because, and we're seeing it now, once NIL is passed, the NCAA has lost a lot of power over athletes, over programs, which is part of the reason why NIL is kind of still a gray area, because the NCAA hasn't passed down really any set legislation. It's different from state to state. The NCAA has some overlying rules that applies to everything. Like you can't do sponsorships with alcohol companies, drugs, gambling, all of that stuff. But outside of that, there's really no set structure. There's no set rules, which is why you're seeing all this stuff with college football. Like these NIL collective schools are forming that some people think is just a way to pay off athletes. I don't think that's the case. I just think it's ways to kind of like promote their school and show that they're really all in on NIL. But so the long-winded answer to the question, I think the NCAA was really against it because it gets rid of that sense of amateurism the NCAA was founded on. Granted, I think it had been gone for a while. And then it just kind of leads the NCAA to not having as much power, which if you're a governing body, you want as much power as possible. So that's not anything against them. That's just kind of how the world works.
And full disclosure, I should have done this at the beginning of the podcast, but Gill Athletics, we are the equipment sponsors for NCAA track and field championships. So all 3 indoor championships, all 3 outdoors, plus the 2 first rounders for Division I. So just full disclosure that, we have a relationship with an NCAA that we love. It's one of our greatest joys is to see you running over those hurdles at Division IIs, man. It really is just a fantastic joy. So just full disclosure there that there is definitely a valued relationship between NCAA and Gill Athletics. But great point there, Trevor, because if I remember correctly, when you talk about amateurism, the Olympics, I'm probably getting some history incorrect here, but maybe you did this as part of your research papers. The Olympics for a long time, there were no professional athlete. Like if you got paid, you could not be in the Olympics. That's why we had college kids for the basketball team for such a long time. There was the huge, during the Prefontaine era, and I'm sure in different eras, where the athletes, again, they needed to get paid. This is their job, but as soon as you made $1 from a shoe company, you couldn't go to the Olympics and things like that. So this is probably what you're describing there. This is not new in the sense of,
no,
hey, here's something we have control over. We're scared of what of not having that control, right? That makes a lot of sense. There's been many things throughout the NCAA that people thought was going to destroy amateur NCAA athletics. There used to be, I don't know if you know this, Trevor, back in the day when you went to college, you as a high school senior, you could not compete as a freshman. It was like an automatic redshirt year. No freshmen were allowed to compete. And so when they were changing that was going to be the end of college athletics. Allowing freshmen to play was just going to destroy NCAA athletics as we know it. And obviously, as you know now, that that's a blip, right? Every freshman mostly competes, at this point. So there's always things like that. So thanks for that explanation. That's awesome. Appreciate that. How has NIL affected you? I did not realize that you have actually been kind of looking at this since senior year, if not before high school. You've actually, this isn't something you just fell into. You've kind of been tracking along with this legislation or release of the rule, if you will. How has it affected you? You had a bang out junior year last year, making the finals of the Olympic trials. Probably, I assume, could have gone pro as a track athlete there, but yet you came back for another year at Ashland. Did NIL have anything to do with that, and how did it affect you?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in the whole NIL aspect because as someone, I've been a diehard sports fan forever. So for me, and I've always looked at things from the athlete's perspective. So I will say, if it sounds like I'm being biased towards favoring athletes, it's because I am. I am an athlete myself, and I've always looked at it from that perspective. So I've always been interested because I felt like for a while, at least the top level D1 athletes kind of got the raw end of the deal with the whole March Madness revenue, stuff like that. But so that's why I've always been interested in it. When it comes to me personally for NIL, I was kind of lucky because the plan for me was to make the Olympic team. If I made the Olympic team, I was going to turn pro. So for me to prepare for turning pro, I understand that pro track and field is a business, and I have to do a lot more things myself to be profitable in that, because it's not as necessarily high revenue of a pro sports career as other pro sports. So I got these books about marketing yourself, about branding. So I had all this stuff laid out for when I became a pro athlete, and I didn't make the Olympic team. So then I had a decision to make, and I wasn't really sure what to do. And then that was right around the time NIL was about to pass. Like NIL was going to pass within the following week, and like that information had gotten out. So once that happened and I realized that, I was like, okay, I can come back to college. I can get my master's degree. I can use what I've already kind of learned myself to build my brand and be profitable still as a college athlete. So then being able to make money off of my name, image, likeness, while still going to college with all that stuff I'd already kind of prepared for the pro aspect, it became a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, it's interesting on the track side, especially because you're right. When a college football player goes pro, even if they don't get drafted, if they only make some free agency or teams, they still get paid a decent amount of money. A track kid is just on his own if you don't start winning races, right? If you don't,
exactly.
So it's a lot tougher there. So and you're spoiled as a college kid, and I mean that in a good way, meaning someone else books all your travel for you. Maybe you have a masseuse and a physio in the training room. That's all stuff you got to find on your own when you're on that next level. So that makes a lot of sense. So how have you gone about NIL as this past year? You talked about researching a lot of branding and marketing books. What was your undergrad, and what are you working on your master's?
So I got my undergrad in sport management with a finance minor, and then I just finished my MBA in executive management.
Okay, overachiever, much. That's great. Jeez, all that while running 48 point. Okay, wow. My college life is starting to look a lot less, man. That makes me feel bad. No, that's awesome, man. So, what have you been doing NIL wise? All those things that you are studying for branding, marketing. What has been that summer, this past summer through fall, and even now as you start into outdoor season?
Yeah. So for me, what I found through like reading books, talking to people that have been there, done that, I've found the most important thing with branding is you have to figure out how you're going to brand yourself. Okay. And you have to stay authentic to that. You have to be true to who you are. Because if you're not true to who you are, let's say you sign a deal with a brand that you don't like or that you don't use, they're just paying you a lot. All of a sudden it starts to become a chore. It becomes really hard. You don't really put as much into it as you should because it's not authentic, right? So for me, I've always made sure to reach out to brands that I've used, that I like to use, or that I even want to use, brands that I know are high quality products. They align with myself and how I want to position myself. So with that being the case, when I have to do, say, an Instagram post, or I have to do Instagram story, a tweet, something of that nature, it's not hard for me to do because I already used the product. So I can just have someone take a picture of me using the product, take some time, come up with my caption, boom, put it out there. And I mean, people are smart, right? You can tell when someone's not being true to themselves. You can tell when someone's doing something just for the money, just for a paycheck. So when that becomes the case, brands are already going to be less likely because they're like, we know you don't really like, they're like, we're going to pay you money to do this. But then they're going to find out pretty quickly that it's like, okay, you're just in this for the paycheck. You don't actually really align yourself with our product. So for me, I've been aggressive about it. So I never hesitate to reach out to companies. The second NIL passed, I reached out to just about every major, like Gatorade, Powerade, reached out to as many companies as I could, because for me, the worst thing they can say is no, or they cannot respond. So for me, it's not a big deal. Best case scenario, they respond. They're like, okay, they're like, we don't really want to do a deal, but we'll send you like a free shirt or something. All right, cool. I got a free shirt. So for me, and that's the number one thing I tell athletes when I'm asked about it, like on Christy's podcast, they asked me about it. I said, reach out. Do not hesitate to reach out to company, because the worst thing you're going to do is not respond or say no. And then if they don't respond or say no, just delete the message. Boom, like it never happened.
Yeah. And So I'll play the other side of it, the company, right?
Yeah.
As much as you are really carving this new path, right? Like there's not a game plan in front of you. It's like, oh yeah, look at all the other track athletes and how they did it. Trevor, just follow that game plan. You're making the game plan. The other side of it, companies like Gill Athletics, we're trying to figure out. This is brand new for us as well.
Yeah.
So we occasionally will get messages from athletes and stuff, and we're still trying to figure out, like, what do we do? We don't want to. My biggest fear as a former college coach myself is I don't ever want to screw up a kid's eligibility. Like that's always my how do we make sure
Yeah.
we're within the rules of whatever rules that aren't there. So the NCAA, when it came out last summer of like, okay, athletes, you can start profiting off of your name, image, and likeness, there was a lot of lack of guidance. There wasn't any rules, salary caps, the rules about alcohol and gambling, and sites like that, or companies like that you can't do. But I believe one of the rules, you correct me, is the NIL has to be, the payment has to be because you are providing a service, you the athlete, not because you are a good athlete. So we can't just give you a check because, hey man, Trevor, you ran 48 point. Hey, if you ran 48 and a half, we're going to give you $1,000 bonus. Like we can't do that, right? It has to be a tweet or something else in that side of things, right?
Yeah, correct. You have to, as an athlete, you have to provide a service because you can't pay for play is not allowed. Another thing specifically not allowed is pay for play. So there can't be any performance incentives or anything like that. And another thing is that, which I don't know how they check this, but I know it's in the rule book, that you have to be paid what's considered a fair price for your service. So it's not like I can just say, it's not like you can be like, hey, we want to pay you a lot of money. Do this Instagram post. We're going to give you $50,000. Now, there are athletes who their Instagram posts are worth that much. And there's different sites, there's different NIL companies that can evaluate how much your posts are worth. But for me, because I've done the research before, I think for me, an Instagram post is supposed to be worth around like $150 or something like that. So if a company comes in, they're like, hey, Trevor, we're going to give you $50,000 for this Instagram post, and I post it, and like say word got out about it, and like the NCAA wanted to investigate it, they're like, okay, Trevor, this company paid you $50,000 for this post, but it says here your valuation is only around $150 per post. Like, what's going on here? And then it would be a deeper investigation, and things would go into that. So it cannot be pay for play, and the payment has to be somewhat of a fair market value for the service you're providing.
That helps prevent a booster from coming in who owns the company saying, hey, I know you thought about transferring. I'm going to pay you $50,000 for a post. You stay. Even though the value is supposed to be 150 whatever dollars.
Yeah, which that's also where things kind of get tricky too, because fair market value, you're worth whatever the market says you're worth, right? Like if it's like, let's say my fair market value is 50,000, but if every company I talk to says my value is 5,000, then what does that valuation really mean?
Right.
So that's where things can kind of get tricky.
And your value is different in different markets, right? Like in the track and field
Exactly.
market, your value may be much higher because people know you in the track and field world, where a basketball website may say, yeah, he's not worth that much to us because he's a track
Exactly.
guy. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So that's where things with the fair market value can get tricky.
Right. And with no guidance or rules, it's up to interpretation at that point.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about social media for this. Is this 99.9% a social media play for athlete and businesses?
For what I've seen, yeah. I mean, social media is essentially the best marketing there is, right? Athlete sponsorship and social media is the best way to do it, because all of pretty much every college athlete's on social media in some way, shape, or form, right? We're college kids, we love social media, so we're already using it. So a company's like, hey, this kid has a couple thousand followers, he's a college student, let's give him X amount of dollars to promote our company. When in reality, if you think about it, for a company to buy an advertisement to say, okay, let's look at it this way. Let's say company A, they can either buy a slot for an ad on Instagram for a week. An ad on Instagram for a week is pretty expensive, right? I don't know the exact price, but it's expensive. So there's that. Or they're like, okay, we can sponsor 7 college athletes, pay them half of whatever this Instagram thing was going to be, and then they'll post something once a month And we then get essentially 7 free advertisements once a month for significantly less money than what we were going to have to pay Instagram. So it's a win for the company because they get credibility, because it's an athlete that a lot of people trust and follow. They get multiple posts, so even more promotion, and the company's saving money doing it. And then the athletes benefit because they're being sponsored by a product that they use and enjoy, and they're also receiving money or merchandise off of it. So both sides are benefiting there, and it just makes sense for both sides.
Are you beholden as the athlete to give the company, like, I don't necessarily want to say proof that you posted? I mean, that's the easy thing, right? Maybe tagging them or whatever. But do you have to share the actual analytics of that post and how well it did? Or
I have not had to yet.
okay.
No, normally I just have to tag them. Sometimes I have to use certain hashtags, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, I haven't had to share any analytics or anything. I have had companies ask before to look at my own analytics and post it when like my views are higher, which I always do anyway, just because that's better to grow social media. But I haven't had to specifically share anything with them about it. They're just kind of like trusting me.
Yeah, that's interesting. So your own, because you're right, depending on the account and how you post and when you post and the people that follow you and the people that you follow, the time of your post will do better or not better depending on the day of the week and the time of the day. So
Exactly.
so you're in tune. So on all these marketing and branding studies have you done? Have you started delving specifically into the social media side of, like, best practices on post and timing and things like that?
Yeah, for me, so I've found for my personal account that I get more views when I post between 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and then around 6 to 8 p.m. because that's normally people's lunch breaks. That's when college students go to lunch. And that's when people, for dinner, that's when people are going home. That's dinner time, that's after dinner, when they just kind of hang out the house scrolling on social media. So the days of the week have kind of been the same regardless for me, but it's normally around those two like hot zones of times where I get way more activity.
Do you do anything outside of social for companies, like catalog imagery or I don't know, maybe local, like, autograph sessions at the local car shop or anything like that, or is it
I mean,
primarily?
I haven't been asked to yet by any companies. I would,
Mhm.
because I mean, I have a good amount of free time with my degree being wrapped up, so I'm not really in classes anymore, and then practice being a couple hours a day. Outside of that, so I have time to do it. I just haven't been asked to.
So, okay, great background there, Trevor. Appreciate that very much. So, I live in the coaching world. I mean, every minute of my day, I am talking to a track coach or thinking about talking to a track. That's my life, right? Like your life is hurdles. My life is coaches, right? And there is, and I'm a big, social media. In fact, that's how you and I reach out to each other, right? It was through Twitter. Right? As everybody knows,
Yeah.
I live on Twitter. So there is, uh, I'm gonna be very elementary school here and put it down into two camps, but it's much more complicated. There's several different camps, but primarily there's two camps. There are coaches who think, I'll say there's three camps. There's coaches who have no idea what NIL. It's brand new. They just, so they don't even touch it. They don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. They just, I don't know, guys. What in the heck is this? Another camp is coaches who think NIL is way overdue, should have been done years ago. These are students first, student athletes. Why can't they make money? Just like the math kid, the math major, the theater major, etc. And then there's a third camp of coaches that think this is terrible. We're just opening up an unbelievable can of worms for cheating. I don't think they necessarily think that the kids shouldn't make money. I don't think they necessarily have a problem with that. I think their main concerns are taken away from your time of your books. You do have to get your grades and your athletics, and we already know those two things alone take up, gosh, an inordinate amount of time as a college
Yeah.
student, no matter what sport you're doing. And now we're going to add this. You've got to worry about what to hashtag and when to send. And, I mean, we won't even talk about it, but there's tax implications here. There's a whole different, you're in a whole different world now, not just a student athlete. You're a business person, right? Why should, if a coach is listening right now and they're like, man, I don't know why Mike has this guy on here. NIL is going to destroy track and field. It's going to destroy NCAA. What would be your suggestion of why a coach should help their student athletes' NIL ambitions?
So The reason you should, regardless of what your thoughts are, is because it's happening. Whether you as a coach like it or not, it's happening. Unless you're a specific school says we're not allowing NIL, which I would not recommend. I think that'll put you as a program at a severe disadvantage. It's going to happen whether you like it or not as a coach. And I think, like you said, those coaches in those first two parties of coaches that have no idea what's going on, they're going to be hands off, and coaches that are for it, they're going to be in a way better spot. Because also at the end of the day, which I assume we're going to ask this question anyway, coaches can't be too heavily involved in NIL, right? Because those are kind of the rules. So NIL is pretty much going to be essentially between the athlete, the company, and the compliance director. So for me, with my deals, I have to send the contracts and the deals to our compliance director. He looks over, makes sure it's okay. Then he sends it, then he gives me the okay, then I can sign and start doing things. As a coach, I don't know exactly how the rules are for coaches. I don't think you can use it I don't think you can use it as a recruiting pitch. You're not allowed to negotiate deals for athletes. You're not allowed to help athletes get deals, I don't believe. All you can do as a coach, I'm pretty sure, is to essentially support your athletes in doing it, steer them towards your compliance director. The compliance director makes sure the kids stay eligible and make sure the deals are okay. And then the athlete pretty much does a lot of it on their own. When it comes to the tax implications, that's something that's super tricky. For me, being a business guy, I immediately made an Excel sheet. I have marked down every dollar I've made from NIL, how I made it, what I did to earn it, so that when it comes time to tax season, I can give it to my parents' tax guy and he can help me out with it.
Now I just feel bad for compliance directors because I didn't know what the coach's role. It's on them, huh?
Yeah, it's a whole other can of worms and I feel bad too for compliance directors. Like at Ashland, we have one compliance director. We have one guy. He's already overseeing all this stuff for sports. Right. Now there's NIL. So now they have to take care of that. Some schools have multiple, which that's the case. Good. That's great. But for a lot of compliance directors, especially as NIL becomes more common, more mainstream, because as of right now, NIL is almost primarily Division I sports, right? You don't see too many Division II athletes getting into it, whereas I've been more forward about it. Like you said, I've been on the forefront with it. But I think over the next couple of years, we'll see NIL really start to trickle down into other sports, other teams, and then it becomes the compliance director. They're going to get a lot busier, even at the smaller schools. I just saw, I think it was USC. It might have been USC, it might have been the Pac-12 as a whole. Someone proposed a rule that of the total NIL pool from like the NIL collectives you're seeing at these big D1 programs, they have to set aside a certain percentage of the money to give to all of the college athletes. I don't know how that rule's going to go, if it's going to pass, or what are the can of worms that's going to open. But that is something I just saw that I just thought I'd throw in there since we're talking about name, image, likeness.
Yeah, you brought up collectives. I've got it in my notes. We're going to circle back around that because that's something I don't really understand either. But but we'll talk about that. What have you? Again, I love that. What I love about podcasts, Trevor, is they're evergreen, meaning this podcast will live out there forever. So 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to be able to come back and listen to this. You're going to be a CEO of your own company at that point in 20 years and be like, man, look what Trevor was doing back in 2022. And maybe in 2044, it's commonplace. It's everywhere. I just love this, real ground floor. We're not even on the ground floor, man. We're like still in the basement trying to figure out how to get to the ground floor. So as someone who's, again, you're finding your way and figuring this out, and you were just a lot earlier than maybe some other people that are starting to figure it out now. Do you, where do you get guidance from? Do you reach out to other athletes, business owners? I don't know. Where do you you have a question? Who do you go to?
So when it comes to guidance, the book I read that I'll still reference now, I'll go back and reread it, is Athletes Are Brands Too by Jeremy Darlow. It is a fantastic, he has multiple books about branding, all of that stuff, but that one's specifically towards athletes. It's mainly for professional athletes. However, all of the concepts still apply to college athletes. So that's the main book I've been reading. And then I haven't really gotten much guidance outside of that because I'm mainly just I'm going to keep building my brand as it is. As my brand grows, I'll reach out to a company here and there, see if there's any extra interest. companies that have said no to me before, I've reached out back to again since getting silver at Worlds, since my Instagram has been growing more, just to see if there's any interest there. If there's not, okay, no harm, no foul, not offended in any way. I'll reach back out to you in a couple months. Like, so that's just kind of how it's been for me when it comes to guidance. I've just been reading up on things and then not being afraid to get rejected by companies.
Athletes are brands too.
Yes.
Okay.
By
Yeah,
Jeremy Darlow.
I'll put that in the show notes, maybe an Amazon link or something. That's good to have a kind
Yeah.
of a resource there. One of the things you were on, so Christy has at least 2 podcasts. The one you were on is called Game Face, and I think that focuses on a lot of NIL activities, a lot of I want to call it more athlete focused, if you will. And then she has another one called like the Sports Biz Miz, I believe it is.
Yes.
And that's the one. That's how I actually found her, was through her newsletter and through this. And on one of those, I can't remember which one, Game Face or Sports Biz Miz, she had, I think she recorded it for Game Face and then also put it on Sports Biz Miz. But she had one of the guys that's part of this D3 hockey group, one of the colleges up in Wisconsin. And they started a YouTube channel and then rolled in when NIL came out, rolled into, making a business, off their name, image, and likeness. I thought it was interesting because it was D3. Again, you're D2, and you're right. This is, at least in the common space, it's thought of as a D1 and maybe as a Power 5 only, air quotes there, thing. But again, you're pioneered on the D2 side, and these guys are D3. But one of the things that really struck me and that I wanted to ask you is they have learned so much more. It was almost like an internship, if you will, of business. Instead of just being in the classroom and maybe in a more formal type of internship, like they had to learn how to go into businesses and negotiate deals. They had to learn how to, when things went wrong, when they, oh, wait, we were supposed to do X, Y, and Z and we didn't, how do we make up for that? They had to learn a lot of this stuff on their own, which, golly, I was listening to it and I was like, I'll hire that kid. That kid already knows what the heck we have to do on the business side here. What things have you learned that weren't, you got a great education. Ashland University is a great academic institution. So you have 2 great degrees, an undergrad and an MBA from there, that are invaluable. What are some of the things, as you have gone through these past, I'm gonna call it 12 months, we aren't even at 12 months for you, that you've learned that was like, oh yeah, we talked about this in business school, but when I had to sit down at the table and do it, what are some things that you've learned through this process?
Yeah, so like you said, Ashland's a great school. All these colleges are great programs. Then at the end of the day, there's nothing like the school of hard knocks, right? There's nothing like actually sitting there yourself, looking over it. So something I've always done with each deal is I read the contract over twice before I even send it to our compliance director, because I want to make sure I fully understand what I'm getting into. And then when I send it to them, then they can double check, make sure everything's okay, see if there's anything I missed. What I've learned is kind of just looking at the contracts and seeing, like, because again, you learn about contracts in business school, but actually sitting there, seeing the contracts, looking at the clauses, seeing that I have to do so many posts per month, or seeing that if there's any time I want to end it, I can reach out to a company and end it at any time. But then there's like a 30-day period where once I reach out to them and say, hey, I'm done with this, this isn't working for me, then there's a 30-day period where I'm still with them, but then it ends. Whereas for some companies, for me, I have the 30-day window, but for them, they can end it immediately. So another thing is to make sure that the contract says they can't end it without cause, right? I don't want them to end my contract just because they want to end the contract. You have to make sure, which some companies are different, some companies are going to have that. So for me, I turned down a company because they had, I can't remember what the clause was. Oh, it was a non-compete clause. So it was a supplement company, and I'm not going to say names or anything, but there was a supplement company that there was a supplement company that I wanted to work with, and I reached out to them, they were interested. But then I saw in the contract, it said whenever the contract ends, there was a non-compete agreement for 2 years. So for me, I had heard of non-compete agreements. I know what non-compete agreements are. But in seeing that it was 2 years, I'm like, I'm a college athlete. Okay, I'm going to my 5th year. Let's say this contract, it's a great contract. Let's say it lasts the entire year. But then I'm like, you know what? I don't want to re-up. I feel good about it. But then there's another 2 years I can't work with another nutrition or supplement company. Like, that's not great for me business-wise. That's not great for me as an athlete. So I asked them, I was like, can we waive that clause, or can we make the contract more beneficial in other ways for me? And they said no. So I was like, okay, I respect it. This isn't going to work for me. And they respected it too. A lot of times, if you're just straight up with companies, you're respectful with them, they'll be respectful with you. So just make sure you fully understand what you're getting into in terms of what you have to do, what's expected on their end of the bargain. And then always look out for like non-compete agreements or stuff of that nature, because that's when things can get really tricky.
Yeah, 2 years seems a little harsh. That's
Exactly.
like, man, we
Yeah.
want to lock you down. You ain't gonna do any competitors, right? What are there any
Yeah.
other non-negotiables for you? So a long non-compete, that sounds pretty obvious. I mean, that's I'm glad you're able to read it because you sign it, right? So it's good
Yeah. You
to
sign it,
have
it's
that
there.
discussion before you sign. Are there any other non-negotiable? Again, you're right, not naming any names of companies and things like
Yeah.
that. Was there anything else like, man, this company wanted me to do X, Y, Z? That ain't my brand. I'm not having it.
I like to have an out. So like I said, like that thing where I can reach out to them, say, hey, I'm done. 30-day window's fine. Like I just like to make sure there's a way I can get out with little to no consequences, because companies want that too. Companies want to be able to get out of the contract just as easy as we want to in case something happens.
Right.
So I respect that. I just want to make sure I have that same liberty. Other non-negotiables, I don't want to do too much stuff per month because I don't like to flood my social media with a bunch of ads and stuff like that. Because when you get to that, you kind of start to lose that integrity of your social media. So for one of the companies I work with, I have to post 2 Instagram stories a month or do a post a month. I'm like, that's fine, because I can do Instagram stories because they're up, they're gone. It doesn't really bother people too much. But if you start seeing me post like 3 times a week and 2 out of 3 times it's ads, people are going to start to lose interest with me, with my social media. So I like to make sure that the requirements aren't anything too often, because then it's just kind of flooding my social media.
Do you have to? I remember this from the Fire Festival. Did you ever see any of those documentaries? You did a couple of documentaries on the Fire Festival. Do you know what I'm talking about when I say?
I've heard about it. No,
Yeah.
I have not watched it.
You should watch one. Both of them are roughly. I think Hulu did one, and maybe Amazon or Netflix did one. Um, but what a lot came up with that disaster, that dumpster fire, really, was all these celebrities were doing ads. They were doing paid ads for it, right? They were getting paid to do, influencer ads, because that's essentially what
Yeah.
we haven't used that word yet, but that's what this is. This is social influencer ads, is what these are, and they didn't put hashtag ads or something like that, or hashtag sponsored, and there became some kind
Yeah.
of rule, I think, out of that. Do you have to do that for all your paid ads? You have to put that notice on there or
So
no?
you can do that. Instagram has a nice feature where if you go to post, there's a thing that pops up, because my it's an athlete account, so it's like a business account, so I can see the analytics. And it says, is this a paid post? And I can say yes. I can list the company, and then it goes to that company's Instagram, and then they have to approve it to make sure that
Oh,
I'm not just saying it's a paid ad. So that's
yeah.
something that makes it easy. A lot of times it's easier to just put hashtag ad, like you said, hashtag ad or ads, because then it lets the person know. It lets it kind of covers your bases as the person posting it. Like, this is an advertisement for a
Right.
product.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know Instagram had that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm much more of a Twitter guy than an Instagram at this point. Um, so you mentioned your calendar. So I have to imagine, and maybe you already were because of being a student and an athlete, your your time management, just staying on top of when I'm supposed to post, when I'm supposed to go to class, when I'm supposed to meet the bus for the meet, practice. I mean, you have to be kind of on point with your organization. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been an organized person. Like, if you ask Coach Clark, he'll say the same thing. But so for me, I just have a reminder on my phone that halfway through the month, I'll get a reminder that says, hey, you have to do 2 Instagram stories for this company, like get that done. And a lot of time, and that's what the beauty is about it being on social media is, and it, like I said, it all comes back to being authentic and being true to who you are. Each company that I work with, I use their products.
Hmm.
So all I have to do is have a teammate or a friend take a picture or video of me using the product, and then boom, I can just put it up later that night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what makes it super easy by using products that you actually use, is it doesn't necessarily feel like a chore. You just like, okay, I just have to knock this out. Boom, it's done. Good to go.
That's awesome.
And then social media, it's just like, we all know how fast you can post on social media. It's just a click of a button.
Yeah, I've already sent out 20 tweets since we've been recording this. So yeah, I know how you see this. Some people might think that I'm a big tweeter. So I average about 80 a day. So
Oh,
not
wow.
yeah. I've hit 300 in a single day before. A lot of mine. This has nothing to do with NIL. A lot of mine is like I think there's so much negativity in the world. So I'm going to be the opposite. I'm going to be the positivity
Oh,
side of
yeah.
it. So probably 95% of my tweets are replying to a kid when they PR or a coach when he says, Trevor hit a PR today. I'll reply and just say, hey man, PRs are special. Congrats. Because
Yeah.
I love school records. Like to me, that's just it's history, for your school and your program. I'll say,
Yeah.
man, school records are legacy. So 99% of my tweets are, congrats. Like they're super small, they get no traction. And then, I
Yeah.
have my native post, my actually big post, but that had nothing to do with NIL. No one's paying me for NIL. Trust me. I guess technically Gil is. I guess they're paying my name,
Yeah.
image,
I
and
mean,
likeness. So yeah,
yeah.
that's good. That's good. So talk to me. I don't understand this at all, and maybe you don't either. I don't know. Again, this is just your opinion. I've seen this. It's coming up a lot with Texas A&M and Clemson and Ole Miss. Football primarily here is this collective thing. What in the world is this?
So I don't 100% understand collectives, but from what I do understand, and I could be totally butchering this, and if I do, please show me some grace here. If not, I mean, you can come after me. It's fine. I can handle it. I got thick skin. But I believe the NIL collectives are essentially companies that are already aligned with the university, right? So there are companies that already work with the university. They might already sponsor athletes. They essentially come together and they work together to then kind of make sure that each athlete in a sport is taken care of. Like I know the first NIL collective was, I think, Texas, University of Texas. I think it was called the Pancake Club, and it's for offensive linemen. And there was a set dollar amount they were going to pay them. And in turn, what the Texas offensive linemen had to do was they would have to do charity work. They could choose any charity in like the Austin community, and they would then have to go out and do I don't remember how many times they would have to hit a certain number of like charity days or charity hours. And in turn, they would receive money for it. So that was specifically for Texas football offensive linemen. And the company viewed it as, we pay the athlete, so they're getting compensated fairly, because everyone in football knows offensive linemen don't get enough love. So they're taking care of an underappreciated group of athletes. The athletes then get to go out into the community. They get their name out there. They show their face. They become a more integral part of the community. And they do this charity work that helps benefit the community, benefits people who have less. And it kind of helps those Texas athletes then also get a better sense of how big of a role they actually have, not just at their school, not just as athletes, but in the community and in the world as a total. So I think that's kind of what the NIL collectives are, is these group of companies coming together, making sure that each athlete is kind of getting a piece of that NIL pie while still doing their part either for the companies or for their communities.
As a former high school offensive lineman, I love that, because you're right. No one knew when I was on the field. I was on the field a lot, but no one ever knew it because everybody was watching the quarterback, the running back, and the receiver.
Well, hey, if no one knows you're on the field as a lineman, it's a good thing. It means you're doing your job.
Yeah, that's a really good, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. So I assume this is because of the NIL culture. We're starting to do NIL here for colleges. I've noticed on social media, of course, where schools, when they're posting a school record or PR or athlete of the week from their conference, things like that, I've noticed more and more. It used to be just a picture of the athlete and athlete's name and maybe their event or whatever. I'm noticing more and more they're putting the athlete's social media
presented by. Oh,
well, I think that's more of an advertising thing.
yeah.
Toyota pays $1 million to this school, so hey, on every one of your posts, we're presented by,
Yeah.
right? No, I've seen the athlete's social media handle on there. And I have to think that's the school saying, hey, look, you come to our school, we're going to help build your brand. Like this is, we never used to know athletes, social media, Twitter handles and stuff. Now it seems like, oh, it's much easier to see on the school presenting their posts and stuff like that. What other ways have you thought about, can a school again, we started talking about the coach here about how they can support, but I'm hearing more like the coach can either be a curmudgeon and say, tisk, you shouldn't do this, or, hey, yeah, okay, go do it. Go talk to Mr. or Mrs. Compliance Director. But yeah, I
Yeah.
bless you, but you still got to do your grades, still got to do the workouts and stuff like that. What are some things that the school or the program can do to help build that brand?
So I think the biggest way to help schools can help build their brands is through the media department, right? Because at the end of the day, media is what works on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny that I just mentioned Texas for the offensive lineman thing. Texas, I remember one of their men's basketball players hit a game-winning shot, and their media team got the video of him like coming in the locker room. People are going crazy, dumping water on him, all that. But what Texas did that was unique was they didn't post it. They gave the video to the athlete and let him post it. So a lot of times school media departments are pretty stingy about like not letting their stuff out, or they'll post it and they'll let the athlete be like, they'll tag the athlete in it, or they'll let them be a collaborator on it, since Instagram does that now. But some schools are starting to let these certain like clips or pictures they have, they're giving it to the athlete, letting the athlete post it. And obviously you make them tag their school sports page in it. But when you give the athlete that power and that access to the media that's already there, the school already had the video, but they then let the athlete post it. It helps the athlete grow their brand. It helps give them high quality content. It helps give them access to things that they necessarily didn't have access to before.
Yeah, I've seen some companies pop up like that. I think one of them maybe is called Influencer. It doesn't have it's cool, so it doesn't have the E at the CER, the CR. Like
Yeah.
how Twitter used to be. Twitter used to be no TWTTR, because that's
Yeah.
that was the cool thing to do back then, right? So I've seen like a company called Influencer. I know there's more companies out there that kind of collate all those media images, right? The pictures and the videos, and then automatically dump it into Trevor's account. And so now you get to go, oh, look, that's a great picture of me. Okay, I'll use this one for
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. Yeah, that's so cool. Because I mean, we're always starved for media. I mean, as much as social media is out there, we want to see pictures of ourselves. And I had I was doing some media event where there's a podcast or an article, and they wanted a picture of me when I coached. Well, man, my last year of coaching was 2005. Cell phones weren't around, so it's not like everybody had a camera like it is today. There's just no pictures out there, and it's like, man, I wish there was some kind of collective to, videos and photos of things back then to use for prosperity. You're going to be able to see all these amazing photos and videos of you 20 years, 30 years. Your kids, your grandkids are going to be able to see Grandpa Trevor hurdle. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Your recent head coach Judd Logan, who was a superstar athlete. So a lot of photos and videos of him were taken throughout his career, and it's still hard to find because we just didn't have the access. I just love that longevity of like, man, we're going to be able to see our history so much easier because of what's going on now. So I love companies like that. They're helping the athletes to increase their social media content, the actual quality of the content, not just, 140 280 characters or whatnot, I like that. So, Trevor, as we start wrapping up today, man, what else can you think of that we should know as coaches? We've been talking college primarily here for maybe obvious reasons, but I have seen where high school states are allowing this too, and I think I don't want to say it's 50-50 right now, but it's getting close to where about 50 state associations allow NIL versus don't. Like there was a famous quarterback in high school in Texas who left his senior year early to go to Ohio State because Texas wouldn't allow high school NIL. So he goes to Ohio State, makes a lot of money, transfers, by the way. And I can't remember where he transferred to, but
he transferred to,
where to?
Texas.
Oh, did he come back to Texas? That's
funny.
Yeah. He wanted those pancakes. That's what he wanted. But I just thought that was interesting that because the state association wouldn't allow it, he left early. So fans didn't get to see him play and didn't get to see his senior year because he can go to Ohio State and make NIL money there. So there is a high school play here. There's high school coaches involved that have skin in the game here, obviously college coaches. As we wrap up, Trevor, what other hints, suggestions, tips might you have for coaches out there that are on the fence for this NIL thing?
So a common misconception with NIL is that the only people that get NIL deals are the best athletes. And that's not true. So there's this company called Open Doors. Okay. they're pretty much the main leader for NCAA NIL. Like they're partnering with a bunch of colleges. They help kind of take care of the compliance stuff for companies. They do a great job of figuring out like how much athlete posts are worth, stuff like that. So they'll post like the top earning potential for like athletes in March Madness, stuff like that. I have found through their company and just through research of my own, the athletes that have made the most money off of NIL are not necessarily the most popular athletes or the best athletes. It's the athletes that have the best social media presence. So a great example of this is the Cavender twins. If you guys don't know who they are, they're a pair of twin female basketball players. If they're at Fresno State, they just entered the transfer portal. They are huge on TikTok, and they've made a ridiculous amount of money from name, image, likeness because they have such a big social media following. Another great example is, I don't know her name, but there's a female gymnast at LSU. She has a great presence on TikTok and other social media. So she makes a ridiculous amount of money off of the NIL. When Open Doors did their post for top earning potential for March Madness athletes, 3 of the top 5 athletes were female basketball players. I think there was the one star basketball player at Duke. I don't know his name. I think he's number 5. I can't remember his name. And there was one other guy, but the other top 3 players were all female basketball players. And a lot of that is because typically you see female athletes have bigger social media presences, because you can be the best athlete in the world, but if you only have like 500 followers on social media, you don't have a big outreach, you don't have a big following, your marketing isn't going to do much for that company, versus this female basketball player that has 100,000 followers, right? So that's kind of what you're seeing more of.
That's interesting. So your suggestion, tip, hint is, don't think of just your quote unquote stud athletes. Like it could go all the way down to your 10th person on your cross country team. There's more factors involved than just your athleticism.
Yes, there's more than just your athleticism there,
and even your school, right? I mean, you mentioned Fresno State, which it's Division I and everything, but I don't believe they were Final Four in the women's March Madness, so
they're not a big school.
Yeah, so
either,
it's not like they were, because I'm surprised when you said about on the overall basketball side, if you'd have said, hey, what teams were the top 5 money earner student athletes from, I'd have said, okay, well, Kansas, North Carolina, Villanova, and
Duke,
yeah, the 4 that made the Final Four. Like they obviously had stars and things like that. And you're like, oh yeah, no, the majority were actually women basketball players, NCAA players. That's amazing.
So that's something to keep in mind that not a lot of people realize.
Yeah, no, 100%, absolutely. So what's the end game for you here now? You got a senior year, your last year of NCAA track. You're going to go out and try to break the Division II national record. I'm going to be there, by the way, so no pressure. I'll be in Grand Valley. So I want to see.
Hopefully,
it in person.
It's warmer than it was last year.
Yeah, no joke. Exactly. Yeah, it will. I'm putting it out there now. It's going to be beautiful, beautiful weather. It's actually, here's what I'm going to bring in with the equipment. We're going to bring in wind down the back straight, but also wind coming down the home straight. You're going to actually have, that's what we're going to bring.
As long as it's wind legal, I'm cool with it.
So, you've got that, and then, obviously, maybe not obviously, you're going to have a pro career, and I hope it's extremely long because you're extremely successful. Have you thought about, and it's so weird to say this because you're still have NCAA eligibility here, but have you thought about after that? Like what's, you got an MBA, great degrees here, sports management. Have you thought about what a professional, not track professional career might look like for you?
Yeah, I've thought about it. Part of me wants to get into college track coaching. Part of me wants to do that. Part of me would be willing to be like a high school athletic director. But another part of me, with more of this NIL stuff coming out as things grow, is to maybe work with one of those companies like an Open Doors, or go to a school that's very NIL progressive, and then find ways to help athletes grow their social media and kind of grow their brand. Because as a college athlete, 4 years is such a small window to capitalize on that. Because even for me as a track and field athlete, once I leave Ashland, obviously there's going to be Ashland fans that are still going to support me and all that. But that amount of like constant support drops off, because again, most of pro track meets happen overseas. There's not as much stuff. I don't have a media team posting videos of me at meets and kind of posting that stuff. So it then becomes much harder. So I want to make sure I want to help other college athletes maximize their earning window as much as possible, which is why this is the second or third NIL related podcast I've done, which is more than track and field podcasts that I've done. And part of me enjoys that because I want to make sure I can help athletes, whether you're track and field or you're volleyball or whatever. You might be a non-revenue sport. You can make a good amount of money off of name, image, likeness just by reaching out to companies and just by staying true to yourself and growing your overall social media.
Yeah, I don't know the full life of a professional 400-meter hurdler, as you take that step this summer at the U.S. Championships in Oregon and then at the World Champs, because you're going to make it, man. I just know it. You're healthier this year. I know the things that came into the trials last year, but you're more confident. You're faster. That also helps.
Yeah.
So just super excited to see what this summer and, professional career starts for you. But I have to think, I just think you have so much value because of what you're creating here that there's some kind of, I don't know if it's, consultancy, your own business, consultancy with one of these, open doors, influencer, et cetera, of just helping people. You've got so much to give. Full disclosure, when I was listening to Christy's podcast and thought, man, Trevor would be great for our podcast to bring value to those who I'm just so humbled to listen to us. There was no hesitation from Trevor. It was like, yeah, absolutely. When do you want to get this done? Let's rock and roll, man. So full disclosure, this is not an NIL deal here. I'm not paying.
No,
Trevor
not
anything.
at all.
I'm sorry, Trevor. We're not paying anything here, but Trevor just, it was very quick. And I actually reached out to Ernie as well, cause I'm, friends with him. I was like, hey man, would he even be interested? And Ernie was like, oh yeah. It was very evident of your servant heart of like, I want to help people. And so I just think that's your future. Like you're going to amaze people and entertain people with the races that you're going to be involved in and the records you're going to break and medals you're going to earn and win and all the money that comes with that, well-deserved. I just think there's, I hate to say it's something bigger because, gosh, in our world, what's bigger than a gold medal, right? But I think there's something bigger of helping others to grow and the value that you can give them. I just see that in your future. So thank you for being here. Let's help Trevor out. And probably, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, one of the easiest ways that we can do that is go follow him on Instagram, Twitter, et cetera. So, and I'll get this after the show. I'll have you message me all the links, so I'll put it in the show notes. But tell us, Trevor, where can we find you? Where should we go to follow you in the social media world?
Yeah, my Instagram and Twitter are the same. They're both just at Trevor Bassitt-30. So it's my name, number 30. They're the exact same. I figured that'd be easier for people. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. I have links in my bio. I have a link tree to like all of the NIL like companies I represent for you to like purchase merchandise from there if you want to. If not, no pressure, won't be offended. But I have links out there if you would want to work, if you want to see what kind of companies I am working with. So yeah, that's the main way to support me.
Twitter and Instagram. I'll have it in the show notes. It's at Trevor Bassitt. What's 30? What's significant?
So 30 was my number in high school track. I tried to get number 3 because that's what I wore for basketball, but I was a freshman and someone took it. So I wore 30. And then it's funny, that was right when Steph Curry was getting popular. So I was like, all right, man, we're rocking with it. We're rocking with 30.
I love it. All right, Trevor Bassitt, and we're going to spell his last name because I got it wrong as well. It's Bassitt, right? I got it right. Okay,
yep,
yeah.
Bassitt.
Yeah, that's right. I kept putting ETT. It's ITT. Trevor Bassitt 30 on Instagram and Twitter. That's 2 places you want people to go to.
Yeah.
And then you'll see a link tree for some of the companies that, hey, they're supporting track athletes. So I'm a big believer in authenticity. I love that your attitude is like, yeah, if I don't use it or like it, I don't promote it.
Yeah.
Authenticity is awesome. So people that are supporting our track athletes, I think we should be supporting them as well. So go check them out. Trevor, man, thank you so much. Man, the most valuable thing you can give me is your time. And, you've given me a lot of time today. I'm just so grateful that you would be so willing. Again, I'm just so thankful for your willingness to be here and help other coaches out. And hopefully that, they can see that maybe this isn't the boogeyman. Potentially, we're still learning it, but NIL is not the boogeyman. That You can be supportive of your athletes, and really then it's on the athletes, right? They got to go to class and make the grades. They've got to go to the track and make the workouts, and then you got a job. You're NIL side, so it can happen. It's obviously can happen successfully. Here's one perfect case, and I know there's other cases in the track and field world where people are making great strides in NIL and still academic All-Americans, athletic All-Americans, etc. So you can still do this on a very high level. So Trevor, man, thank you so much for being here today. I'm just so grateful for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Again, athletes, make sure you keep the main thing the main thing. School comes first, then track, then NIL stuff. You take care of the first two, number three is going to be way easier to take care of. So again, thank you for having me. Glad I could help out. I appreciate it.
I love it. Keep the main thing, baby. That's love it. I love it. We're out.